Hello, everyone. Today I am going to be reviewing the eighth studio album by British alternative rock band Coldplay. This album is titled Everyday Life, and it just came out this past Friday, November 22nd. This comes 4 years after their last album, A Head Full of Dreams, which was released exactly 4 years ago at the end of 2015. And there was a lot of things that Chris was saying that was making us believe that this was going to be that band's final record and that they were probably going to retire after that output. We then did get an EP in 2017, which was still very much kind of themed towards the A Head Full of Dreams era while they were touring. You know, songs that were, again, very pop. That last album was definitely a big sort of celebratory, dancey album that felt very pop for the band. And I know some people are not such a big fan of their more recent work because of that. They feel like the more kind of gritty and acoustic and like live instrument based band sound, not just Chris Martin with some electronics. They feel like the band sort of had lost its direction a little bit. I am of the camp who has actually really liked some of Coldplay's more recent outings from this decade. And I love Coldplay's earlier music too, but I gotta be honest, I'm almost more familiar with their music from the last 10 years than I am from the music from the previous 10. Just because, I didn't follow Coldplay until Viva La Vida came out. So things before then, I've heard Clocks, I've heard I've heard Yellow, I've heard Fix You, I've heard A Message. Some of those songs really powerful, but I haven't heard everything from those albums, and I should at some point get myself into that. But here we are with Everyday Life. We have this black and white cover of them sort of inverted on top of each other. The band sort of in this old-timey photograph setting. And what's really interesting is that this album is obviously a concept record for the band. They are trying to, create a record that flows into one another beautifully, flows within itself beautifully with intros, interludes, outros, lots of different sound bites from different aspects of things. There's no features on this record, but there are lots of vocals that are featured scattered throughout that aren't necessarily Chris Martin's. So there's a real element of mystery, mystique, inspiration, hope, also sadness, despondency, frustration, anger. This album is an album that really feels like it is one of the current climate that we live in socially and politically. Obviously, the fact that the band chose to perform this album live for the very first time in Jordan, the country, is obviously a sort of statement to obviously the fact that the band is trying to experience different world cultures, which is something that, a British band of all white guys who have been around the block for a while, them starting to sort of dip their toes into other country cultures that are not Western and sort of filming videos in exotic locations. This is not necessarily something that's surprising by any means. I don't actually think it's quite as revolutionary as they might think it is. They're super rich. They can film wherever they want. If they want to do a concert on the rooftop of an old citadel in the center of Jordan's capital, they can do that. But at the end of the day, is that really actually doing anything for the locals? Is this really fully altruistic, or is this just a elaborate show to put on? And you know what? It's okay if it is just a bit more of that elaborate show. Coldplay is a very altruistic band. They have turned themselves into, Chris Martin especially being super zen, being, a spokesperson for the underrepresented, particularly with the refugee crisis. This album in particular, it's about bringing people together from places that, we don't often want to talk about as beautiful or ideal places, trying to create homes for them. The refugee crisis is this huge ongoing struggle that we're dealing with, particularly from the Middle East. And so obviously them centering the epicenter of this record around that is definitely making that bold statement of, we need to be telling these stories more, and we need to really do something to counter, Islamophobia, xenophobia, racism, prejudice, all of these things that is starting to congeal into the frameworks of a lot of governments in the West, unfortunately, in terms of right-wing governments and nationalist movements. And so this album is, it's an answer to Trump. It's an answer to Putin. It's an answer to Benjamin Netanyahu. It's an answer to Bolsonaro. It's an answer to all of the dictators, Boris Johnson, all of the sort of right-wing dictators that have been, really sort of unfortunately gaining ground this decade. And I find comfort in this record because of that, and I know that's what they were wanting to do. This album doesn't feel quite as personal, and yet to Chris and the band, because it does feel like they're telling stories of things that they could not possibly actually relate to. Chris is sort of interjecting himself into these narratives, and I understand why he's doing it. Again, like I said, they put out so many records. And so at this stage, he's really trying to just open this canvas up to let other people paint the pictures almost for him. The music sounds just as soft and delicate and almost effortlessly catchy and beautiful as almost ever. After listening to this whole record, I'm not entirely sure if it's my favorite, but before I spend too much longer rambling on about it, let's get into the track by track. The first track we have is the opening Sunrise. It's this sweeping orchestral moment. Actually, not a whole lot going on with it. It is meant to just be an intro. And as far as the feeling of Sunrise, keep in mind, this album is split into two parts. There are 16 songs, but don't let the 16 songs fool you. A lot of these songs are actually quite short, like under 3 minutes. So this was one of them. And it's just a, palate cleanser. There's not really, as much as it's sweeping and emotional in the uses of the strings, I don't know if it necessarily blew me away. I just felt like it was just setting the stage, sort of, like a preamble to the first real song, which is Church. So there are a lot of comparisons that can be made between this record and their last, A Head Full of Dreams. And Church is one of those songs that definitely feels like it's pulling from the same energy that A Head Full of Dreams was after. This esoteric, spiritual, epic pop moment for the band. There are some gorgeous, I don't know if it's Indian or if it's Middle Eastern, but there is some gorgeous female vocal deliveries that are looped amongst the production, which gives this song a real feel of vastness and a lot of spiritual undertone. What can I tell you when I'm with you? I'm walking on air. But what can't I get through? And for everyone everywhere, you're answering every prayer. And when you're riding a wave, oh, won't you ride that wave to me? When you're setting your sail, oh, can I be your seventh sea? Because when I'm hurt, then I'll go to your church. I see this as a metaphorical understanding of spirituality and worship, to be about, people's connections and relationships. So he's singing about the church in a very personal and yet at the same time very cosmic way, so that anyone can relate to it and put in that sort of missing piece of the puzzle as to what is their real church that they need to help themselves feel more whole or connected. So the vagueness of this song is purposeful to open it up into the very, very spiritual and also the very interpersonal. It's a solid track for them, for sure. We come to Trouble in Town. Right away with the lyrics, we immediately can tell what this song is going to be referencing. This song, singing trouble in town because they cut my brother down, because my sister can't wear her crown. There's trouble in town, blood on the beat. Oh my goodness, there's blood on the beat. Law of the jungle or law of the street. There's blood on the beat. And I get no shelter and I get no peace. I just get more police. And I get no comfort and I get no name. Everything is getting strained. So police brutality is the main theme around this song. And as you know, especially in the US, but all around the world, non-white people being cruelly subjected to harsher treatment by police officers is it's a real racial injustice issue that we have going on in this country. And there's even some audio recordings of some of this going down used towards the back end of this track to really just amp up the atmosphere and give it that context that if it wasn't clear already, this is where we're going. This song is at once a bit acoustic. It's still at the same time very produced. It's got more of a traditional Coldplay feel. So it does remind me a little bit more of their earlier records, mainly because of the guitar chords and some of the ways the song's produced and the movement of it. I do think, though, what really makes this song stand out is the lyrics and really just the message that needed to be made for it. It's not surprising that Coldplay is making a song a lot of big artists, and particularly a lot of white artists, have been making music about this to sort of say, I mean, I really do believe it when they write this, but it's like, hey, I'm on your side. I know I might be white and I might look very privileged, but like I see what's going on and I'm addressing it. And, for these artists to be doing it in a big pop song is a good thing. And at the end of the day, what more? I don't know. There's always more that can be done. There's always more that can be done, but these aren't politicians. These are musicians, at the end of the day. So they're going to sing about it. Maybe that's just the way they're going to try and draw attention to it. And attention still needs to be drawn to. And so keeping with that vein of sort of in these sort of elements, telling the story of particularly the Black Americans' perspective, we go into the song Broken, where the E is capitalized. Not quite sure why. And and you knew it was going to happen at some point, Chris Martin singing a gospel song. This sounds exactly like how you would think it is in your head. This is Chris Martin going to the Black church and, getting out that tambourine and just swaying side to side with the congregation. But somehow he's the one who has the microphone, not the, other people of the church. And you're just like, okay, they let this white guy in, like, let him, have his moment. And trust me, I have no qualms with it. It's catchy. It's a very, traditional gospel sounding song. It speaks of, that struggle of constantly trying to keep your head up against adversity. The lyrics are, exactly what you would expect them to be. I can't really fault it for that. It does feel a little bit contrived, though. That's my only sort of query with it. I think that, it's sort of a shorter track, so it's not necessarily meant to be a single. It's not really meant to be like, oh my God, this is a Coldplay song. I really do view this song as more of just a bridge between other tracks to sort of add context and richness to the story that we're telling, the story that is of the current moment of 2019, for example. And so when people think of Coldplay, they're not going to necessarily think of this song and like play this song to someone and say, this is a Coldplay song. It's like, no, this is an interlude. This is just Coldplay exploring and experimenting with different cultures and, aspects of everyday life, which is what this album is called. But the way we seek into the gentle, gentle heartbeat of the most gut-wrenching track on this record, the most minimal, the most reminiscent of their wonderfully beautiful, understated album, Ghost Stories, we have Daddy. When I saw that album title before I heard it, I was like, that album title makes me a little uncomfortable. And I don't know why, but it just does. The word daddy, it's not romantic. It's sort of like daddy. It has this weird connotation in my head. But all of that is stripped away once you listen to this gorgeously soft, understated, gut-wrenching moment on this record. Just Chris with very, very delicate, almost unsure of themselves chords on the piano until he soars with that gorgeous falsetto, with just the beautiful reverb on his voice that echoes and fills the room. It's before, in the verses, it's like all very close, and then it just expands out like this deep breath. And boy, will the tears well up. Now, obviously, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend checking out the official music video. It's a animated music video where they have this doll character of this girl who's lost at sea with oars, on a canoe, trying to find her father. The connotation, she goes through this fantastical journey of riding on whales in the sky, and it's the connotations around this is about the refugee crisis. It's very clear to me, even without reading up on it, that this was where the inspiration for this song came from. But this song can be interpreted and internalized by anyone who's lost their father or has gone significant amounts of time without their father being with them. Maybe their father was deployed overseas for a huge part of their life, or they, have a stepfather or a divorced parent situation, or he passed away, which is the most gut-wrenching, I think, and interpretation for me of this song. I have not, fortunately, had to relate to any of those situations. However, I will constantly say that one of the most tear-jerking emotions for me to experience and feel is the emotion and experience of a child losing their parent and looking for them. I can't explain to you just like how devastating that is to me when I see, especially a song so delicately and beautifully constructed as this, so melancholy, articulating those emotions. It just broke me. And the innocence of the animation It's very much geared to kids, but at the same time to adults. The innocence that's carried through with the simplicity of the shapes used in the doll's face. Just that closing, moment where the two hands come together. You don't need a whole lot to convey a ton symbolically and emotionally. And so this track does huge waves without having to, actually make much of a physical splash. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's the best track on this record for me just because of the emotional impact. And it does remind, as many Coldplay fans will agree, it does remind me a lot of the gorgeous closing track on Ghost Stories titled "Oh," this beautiful melancholic vocal against the piano. We segue into another interlude, which is abbreviated WOTW/POTP, which is Wonders of the World / Power of the People. Again, this is just Chris strumming at the guitar. It feels like a demo. It feels like he's just on the streets of some town, Jerusalem or something. You can imagine this globe-trotting, Anthony Bourdain type who's like, experiencing different cultures, and he's just sort of seeing all the injustice and is strumming his guitar and is just like, look at all this craziness right now, but the wonder of it all, and we're going to bring the power to the people. It's a bit simplistic for my liking. I just feel like there are aspects of this album that come across slightly contrived. And I guess it just can't be helped. It's the fact that, they're this band who's been known to be kind of one thing for a long time, but then has slowly been trying to morph into something else. And so now they kind of want to be this voice of the oppressed. And I believe them. I don't have fault them at all. But sometimes I think they take the very simplistic route when it comes to some of the lyrics they choose and whatnot. But like I said, it's just an interlude. I'm not going to fault at them for that at all. We then, again, some of the most beautiful transitions are around this point of the record. The transition from this song, which is very soft and demo-like, to the very full-bodied, produced moment on this record, and my second favorite song on this album, if not my first favorite, Arabesque. Now, this is one of the two songs that were released as a single, which I've already reviewed on this channel. Please look in the description. I'll link my review of those two songs. I will just say again, Arabesque is a real moment. It's this crescendo. It's this spiritual moment, but it's also this moment where Chris can really get the band together, which is something I think you sort of are missing after a few of these songs where you're like, this feels like Chris Martin and, just a piano or maybe some gospel choir or a guitar. This is where the band fully comes together. Perfect blend of the trumpets, the brass, the saxophone. It's so groovy. I love the, music is the weapon of the future line. It feels like it feels at once like a warning and a declaration. So, it's like, this is music of the future, and yet at the same time, it's so reminiscent of the past. It's a beautiful blend of both. And I do love how it just starts out in this cafe setting and just suddenly escalates, and it's just gorgeous. And there's something very meditative about the progression of this song. It's repetitive enough, you kind of can still dance to it, but there's something, you think of Arabesque and you think of those delicate lines used in those Islamic mosaic patterns. I imagine someone painting, listening to this song, and as the song builds, you're getting to the point where the circle's complete, and it's more and more exciting. It's building that energy. A wonderful moment for sure. And then we have probably one of the most surprising songs, but we end the sunrise section on this record with When I Need a Friend. This is, if Chris Martin's Broken was him going to the Southern Black Church, this feels a lot like Chris Martin going to Westminster and being in the very much kind of white church choral environment on the risers. This is like this full-bodied, almost oh holy night moment for this record. There's parts where it sounds like it's going to just turn into a church Christmas hymn. There's some references to Christian language thrown in there. Holy, holy dove descend, soft and slowly when I'm near the end. Holy, holy dark defend, shield me, show me when I need a friend. Slowly violence end, love reign over me when I need a friend. Whew! The swelling of that choir is just gut-wrenchingly gorgeous. Again, this is a song that doesn't quite feel so much like an interlude. It does really feel like it's its own moment. There's this gorgeous Spanish prayer spoken by a man at the end of the track, which gives a bit of a back down to earth moment, which I think is beautiful to contrast, the esoteric reachings of the earlier part of this track. I find this song very captivating, and I am a sucker for gorgeous church choir or choral moments. The richness and harmony and the choir backing is just so luxuriously gorgeous in sound. Chris kind of gets lost amongst it, but that's okay. He's meant to be one of many voices on this track. Okay, so we entered the second set of this record, which is Sunset. Now, there were certain songs that I was kind of surprised were on the side that they were on. I thought that Daddy would be on the Sunset side of this record. And I thought that Orphans would probably be on the Sunrise section because of the sound. It just makes me think of that particular time of day. But actually, having listened to the full-length album, I actually sort of see where the songs fit and why they fit where they do. I actually kind of now agree with the choices that were made to put certain songs on the Sunrise and certain songs on the Sunset section of this record. It only makes sense, though, in the context of the full album. And so now it doesn't seem too weird to me. We open the Sunset side with the provocative and probably one of the most direct songs on this record, Guns. This song has a bit of it's very singer-songwriter. It reminds me a lot of almost bluegrass, but not quite. But it's country in sound. And this song is speaking about the abundance of guns in our world, especially in the United States, and how governments seem to be wanting to do everything they can to protect the rights of gun owners. Yet every time we see atrocity after atrocity in all of these places like schools and playgrounds and malls and movie theaters. And you can really hear the frustration in Chris's voice as he sings this song. I mean, he really breaks through with some of those lyrics. The judgment of this court is, we need more guns. And I'm just going to angrily strum away at my guitar, okay? So just, give me that moment to frustrate and vent. Again, not a highlight moment for me, but a moment that needed to be included, obviously. It does feel like, from song to song, we're touching on all the big issues of today, and so I see why it fits. We then segue into Orphans. This was the real first single of this record. This, like I said in my Orphans review, which is linked in the description, this song does sound like A Head Full of Dreams 2.0. It basically sounds like a Hymn for the Weekend 2.0. I don't have anything against it. I think old school Coldplay fans won't be such a big fan of it, though, just because of the shoutiness of it, the sing-along kind of campy aspect of it. But the moments where it sort of sparses out and lets that sort of synth work or guitar work come through, still magical, still so ambient and yet beautifully constructed to be this great pop moment. So I don't have anything to say negatively about this song. Beyond the fact that, it's not groundbreaking new territory for them. Now, I was told in the comments of that video, because I was a little confused by the lyrical content of that song, apparently this song was written about some sort of structure that was blown up in Damascus in Syria in 2018, and about a child who lost their parents in that explosion. So you think, oh, this is such a celebratory, fun song. It must come from light subject matter. No. This is about, orphans who have lost their parents due to terrorist violence in the Middle East. And so the context of that, I think I like that they've turned it into such a celebratory moment because, again, it's making light through dark places. And it's about hope at the end of the day. And that's what this song is trying to reach. Okay, Echo. This is a really interesting song for me. So we move to Africa on this track. The word echo is apparently the Yoruba language word for Lagos, which is the capital of Nigeria. Joseph rode in on a beam of light. Stray dogs to welcome him, fights, corrugate cathedrals, the sight of the pilgrims going nowhere in millions of cars. Lagos, a dream in the distance, from promises he'd made behind when there was no harvest, but he missed the sky and its circus, and countless the stars. In Africa, the rivers are perfectly deep and beautifully wide. In Africa, the mothers will sing you to sleep and say, "It's all right, child, it's all right." This song has got some piano, it's got some guitar. It's just a melancholic reflection on the continent, basically, of Africa. And yet it gets hyper specific around Nigeria in certain parts of the lyrics. Um, Again, this is like Chris Martin channeling someone else. Obviously, he doesn't have these experiences of Africa in the same way as someone from Nigeria would. But it is sort of him using himself as a channel for stories that he's probably heard on the road, and wanting to pay homage to. It's a delicate, beautiful moment. I don't think it's too like when I first heard it, I was like, wow, like why is it kind of uncomfortable to me to hear white people from Britain who have no connection to Africa sing about Africa in this way? And I was like, well, I can sort of understand where I'm coming from, with the whole colonialist narrative. But unfortunately, you have to take Chris Martin, the individual, out of that. There are so many white artists who have sung about Africa. Toto is the perfect example. And it shouldn't be problematic. Unfortunately, though, I do think there needs to be some self awareness when artists do sort of transplant themselves into an environment that they would normally not have any tie to, that has historically, when someone who looks like them has come in and sort of made themselves at home, had some, racial kind of connotations, or problematic connotations, let's just say, colonialism and all of that. And so the directness of some of that song, it really almost does kind of just make me wish that Chris had let an actual Nigerian artist sing the song. But at the end of the day, I understand. I just feel like it would have been more emotive and powerful to hear someone else's vocals sing these lyrics, because I don't quite believe them the same way. I do believe them. I know that Chris is inspired by landscapes. He's inspired by people. He writes these lyrics because of what he is seeing, and he should be allowed to do that. But there is just a part of me that, when it's so obvious that that's what he's doing, there is still a part of me that wants him to showcase, at least collab with that person and have them featured on the song. Apparently, he does collaborate with the vocals of someone named Tiwa Savage, but they're not credited in the song as a feature. So, anyway, this is like nitpicky. I'm not trying to start anything. It's just I have to process, if I'm explaining this record, I have to process some of my feelings when I was listening to some of these songs. It's a beautiful moment acoustically. It's a beautiful moment. Cry, cry, cry. We get that jazzier sort of pitched vocal. It's pretty catchy. I think that we're heading back to sort of bluesy territory. I'm thinking of the American South. This song just has that vibe, but it feels a little bit more like Coldplay than Broken does, because it's more their sound and it's not just like them in a gospel church. But again, it's a shorter track and it just doesn't quite stand out to me. It's kind of forgettable. I hate to say it. It's got some interesting chords, but I don't know. Old Friends is probably the most meandering track on this record, and it's definitely the most forgettable. It's, just him at the guitar. You really do start to forget that this is a guy who has actually like 3 other bandmates around him, because it really starts to become the Chris Martin show, as it often will do sometimes on his records. On these records, I just said it was his record. You know what I mean? So when it's just him and a guitar, you do sort of lose that a little bit. And, it's a nostalgic song for Chris. This is the one song that is actually really personal for him. This isn't about the world. We're just talking about Chris Martin and his life story. He's talking about his childhood friend, Tony, and how he saved Chris from getting hit by a car once while riding a bike. So it's a beautiful little moment and homage to that. In the context of the album, yeah, it's fine. I don't think it's doing anything sonically interesting. I don't think, there's too much of just the guitar and Chris on this record for my liking, where it doesn't really go anywhere. But at the end of the day, in the context of the record, it's fine. It's just there. But it's not a highlight track for me. Okay, so the next track, I had to look up what the translation of the Arabic in this song's title is Bani Adam, which means children of Adam. But in Arabic, it's usually just referred to mean human beings. Obviously, children of Adam are considered to be all of us, right? We're all children, descendants of Adam. This song opens up with this very grandiose swelling piano moment. I don't know if Chris is one playing this piano, but it is very well done. I have a feeling it is. Apparently, this is part of a poem from a Persian poet, Saidi. So it's not Farsi though. It is Arabic because I recognize the Arabic writing. So it's a bit of a Persian Arabic blend here that we got going on. I'm going to read the Sufist poet poem that was created by the Saadi Shirazi. The children of Adam are the members of one another, since in their creation they are of one essence. When the conditions of the time brings a member to pain, the other members will suffer from discomfort. You who are indifferent to the misery of others, it is not fitting that they should call you a human being. You are not really human if you don't know what it is to care for someone else other than yourself, especially someone who doesn't look like you or think necessarily like you. It comes back to what Jesus said: help thy neighbor. Um, don't always think about yourself. Service to others, not service to self. Chris Martin has explored Sufism in his music. He has a huge interest in it, in a lot of different religions. He's probably explored Buddhism as well and Hinduism. Um, and so this song is, like I said, it doesn't, it just feels like this art piece statement around that sort of idea. It reminds me of Kaleidoscope, which was a song in a similar vein off of their last album. There is spoken word towards the end of the song by, I would presume, a Muslim woman. The song feels like it's contextually placed within its people because of that. So Chris Martin's vocals don't appear, and I actually kind of appreciate that. If Chris Martin started doing, Allah Akbar, it would be a little, I don't know, it would just come across kind of corny. I don't know. Okay, so we pick the album back up in terms of tempo with Champion of the World. This is another stadium filling moment. I was wondering, besides Orphans, where is there other song on this record that's really going to get people on their feet? But the truth is that this song, although it's thumping and it's aggressive and it's loud and fun, this song does not sound so much like their more recent offerings. This does sound like a song that could have come off Viva La Vida, or a song that could have come off X and Y, or even Rush of Blood to the Head. This song feels like classic Coldplay with the, crashing guitars and the ecstatic alternative flair. There's even this moment where it sounds very sort of Beatles-esque when he says, I am riding on my bicycle, going up away from the earth. I've got E.T. on my bicycle. I'm like, these lyrics are hilarious, but the harmonization of them, they feel like just classic, And it does remind me, isn't there a Beatles bicycle song? So, it reminds me of that. But I think the best part is Chris Martin's yodel vocals. They're so triumphant and so clear-cutting in the mix. I love them. It really elevates the melody of the song. Because most of it, instrumentally is just this crashing guitar chord over and over again. Durner, durner. But he creates, in the melody and structure of the song, this soaring melody that's just so ecstatic. And it's, again, it's at once personal to Chris. He's singing about, in school, he lost every duel and he didn't get along with the other boys. He's turning that, his own interpersonal experience, to the world and saying, all of us can relate to this. We all are, a lot of us underdogs. This is a song for us to rise up and, put it to the bullies and the racists and the bigots of the world and really champion change and be the catalysts we want for a world that is a better place. The closing track, Everyday Life. We get that full symphonic chamber orchestra moment that I really love to see from Coldplay. Again, it feels a little bit like a Ghost Stories moment for me. It reminds me of that record the most. Also, maybe a little Milo Xyloto. I don't know if I pronounced that right. I always never knew how to pronounce that album. It's just beautiful, melancholic, hopeful tone. I don't know how else to describe it, with the mixing between rock and orchestra. And it's just a great closing moment for this record, along with the piano. What in the world are we going to do? Look at what everybody's going through. What kind of world do you want it to be? Am I the future or the history? Because everyone hurts, everyone cries, everyone tells each other all kinds of lies. Everyone falls, everybody dreams and doubts. Gotta keep dancing when the lights go out. And there's a similarity in chord progression to the sunrise part of the album. I knew it sounded familiar. I was like, they bookend the albums with a similar sort of chords to sort of thematically close out the record. This is a gorgeous moment, and it's my third favorite song on this record. I highly recommend checking it out. I mean, it's a utopian call to unity, and I mean, as much as it seems so innocent, it's still so needed in this day and age where we're just from the news and everything we see, it's just like so hard to digest all the horrors that are still being committed on this earth. And at the end of the day, like trying to see the real humanity behind all of us and what unites us rather than divides us and what we're all really looking for. And it's a beautiful culmination of all that to try and see the good in things when it's so hard and the world and the media is focusing so much on the negative. At the end of the day, as we move into this new decade, love, equality, humanity, compassion, these have got to be the, ultimate forces that govern us. And so at the end of the day, no better message to close out an album with. Um, and it's a familiar theme for Coldplay, and I don't expect them to quit using that theme going forward. It's like, why not keep spreading that message, because unfortunately there's still a lot of people that need to hear it. But it's a beautiful sentiment to close out. Ultimately, I've heard mixed reviews. I've heard some people say that this album is nice. It's a pleasant listen, but it's not one of their greatest. I've also heard some people say, hold the phone, good Coldplay is back. And this is like a huge 180 and a big improvement from their last few records. I can see how, coming from a head full of dreams, this album would be a breath of fresh air, because this does have a more raw, personal, almost rockier, edgier feel to it than the very polished kind of Beyonce feeling album that was A Head Full of Dreams. Didn't Beyonce have vocals on that one song and everyone was like, oh my God, they've sold out completely? I mean, still quite, an epic moment, that record. But, this is a more introspective album. This is a more, understated, elegant record. I think it has its gorgeous highlights. I also think it has some of its forgettable filler. I do think that the lyrical content shines through a lot more than some of the actual instrumentation on some of these songs. But, maybe that's what they were going for. They just wanted to, paint pictures with a guitar and some basic beats and not be so, overproduced. And I do appreciate that the production is reined in a little bit, and there isn't so much EDM. So this isn't necessarily an album that's meant for those loud, huge, long, colorful rainbow shows that they were doing with their last record. This is more of a like, atop a old fortress in the Middle East at sunrise or sunset, performing these songs, or at the intimate piano moments. So I do think that this is a good album. Whether I think it's their favorite, I don't know. Conceptually, it's pretty strong. There's elements of previous records that I love. Like I said, highlight tracks, Daddy, which is just so gutting and so beautiful. Everyday Life, Arabesque, Orphans. I do think Orphans is a good track, for all its campiness. And When I Need a Friend. That song really floored me. And Church. Church is a good moment too. Little elements of all their different records in there, I would say. And for a band that we thought they were, putting up the hat and calling it a day, they've come back and, a little bit returned to form, I would say. But I don't know if it's their absolute best record. I don't know if it can top, some of their earlier records or Ghost Stories or, elements of it. It's a little unpolished in parts, and I'm just not entirely sure. We'll see how it ages. Let me know in the comments what you think of this record, and what your favorite songs are. I may do a video where I talk about all my all-time favorite Coldplay songs, so I hope to cover some more Coldplay on this channel in the future. But I just don't know if I'm going to go back and actually review the actual albums individually. I just don't know if I'm going to get around to doing that, but just as an FYI. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed this review. And as always, peace, love, and light. Bye.